So you've learned the ukulele and you know a few chords and a few songs and you're starting to play guitar. Now maybe you're a little intimidated or your fingers hurt. Maybe you can't quite figure out how to get that clean sound. In this video, I'm going to share 5 tips for ukulele players that are learning to play guitar. Here we go. The actual tuning of the ukulele is very similar to the guitar, right? In fact, if I were to just play this note here, that sound uses the same 4 strings, the bottom 4 strings here of the guitar. Tip number 1 is to apply the chord shapes that you know from the ukulele to the guitar. Now notice I said chord shapes and not just the chords or the chord names. And that's because as we apply those shapes to the guitar, the name changes, right? We can look at what is the similarity with the shape from the ukulele. For instance, I've got the F chord shape, right, from the ukulele. That would look like that. But on the guitar, I just gotta add my 3rd finger here, and now I've got a C chord, okay? So generally speaking, you could look at what you do with these 4 strings here, and then try to figure out, well then what do I need to do on the 5th and 6th string here, right? Some chords work exactly the same way on the ukulele as they do on the guitar. For instance, the G shape from the ukulele is the D chord on the guitar. And you're only gonna play those 4 strings, okay? Cool. Now the second tip I have is about how to reduce the buzzing that you sometimes get. Oftentimes we're holding a chord and you get that kind of buzzing, rattling sound. It doesn't sound very clean. The real trick here is about getting your finger to be as close to the fret as possible, okay? So now I'm gonna do that same chord again, but I'm gonna keep my ring finger right here behind the 3rd fret, middle finger behind the 2nd fret, index finger right there. Now, sometimes on the ukulele, when the frets are so close to each other, we don't really have a problem with the placement of the fingers. But on the guitar, there's so much room for the fingers to sit that, we can sometimes forget that. That might lead to an issue with the buzzing. Okay. The 3rd tip here is about hand and finger placement. And it's probably the most useful tip for most ukulele players learning to play guitar. In that, I've got 3 things here I'm going to show you. The first is about your wrist, okay? Be careful not to overextend or maybe place your wrist too high up or out. You want to keep your wrist relatively flat and straight, just so that you can focus more on your fingers holding on to the strings as opposed to using your wrist to try to assist with that, okay? Just keep your wrists flat. The next tip is the angle of the fingers, generally speaking, is going to be diagonal. Okay, when you're on the ukulele and the frets are a little bit closer and the ukulele is a little bit smaller, you can get away with keeping your fingers perpendicular to the strings, right? But when your hand's a little bit further out and you're kind of reaching across, a wider width of the neck, then it helps to keep your fingers at this diagonal angle. So I'm going to show you, I've got a G chord there, the C chord, right? Even this D chord, right? They all kind of come from this angle, and that's going to give you, it's just going to make it a little bit easier for your fingers to hold these chords, as opposed to if you were trying to hold your C chord like this, like that, your G chord like that, come at it from the side, diagonally. All right, the last part when it comes to hand and finger position is the thumb, okay? I like to place the thumb on the upper section of the neck, kind of right around there, okay? And that just gives my hand a kind of a tighter grip on these guitar chords. I'm not necessarily overextending it like that, just kind of placing it towards the top so I can hold these chords a little bit stronger. The one exception to that is when you start to learn bar chords, that's when it may be useful to drop the thumb just a little bit, okay? Because that's gonna allow your hand to get into this place where your index finger is barring the strings, right? Like for instance, like an F and a B flat. But those chords are a little bit more difficult, and so you probably wanna learn your open chords first and then start learning to play those bar chords later. Okay, before we get on to the next tip, if you're getting value out of this video, hit that thumbs up button and leave a comment below. Let me know what questions or comments you have about learning to play guitar. Okay, tip number 4 is about learning to play these chords as a grouping of fingers, not one at a time. For instance, if I was learning to play the C chord, right? Oftentimes I see people going like this, 1, 2, and 3, and then they'll play their C chord, right? The problem with that is you start to build up a bad habit, right? You start learning that the C chord comes like this, 1, 2, 3, and then you play it. And that's gonna make it a lot harder to transition between your chords as you start learning more songs. The correct way to do this is to visualize all the frets that you need to hold down and bring your hand into that position all at once, right? So for instance, that's the C chord, here's the G chord, here's the D chord, okay? And that's really just about training your hand to sort of form these chords a lot quicker and at the same time with all of your fingers. The fifth and final tip I have for you, because you've already learned to play the ukulele, you probably have a catalog of songs that you're familiar with and that you enjoy playing. Don't be afraid to take out that song list and start relearning those songs on the guitar. But one thing to keep in mind is try to find songs in the key of G. In the key of G, we've got a lot of comfortable open chords, right? And those are G and C, D. You even got E minor and A minor, which make it a lot more enjoyable, right? When you're first learning to play guitar, is that you can actually hold some of these chords. Some of the keys to stay away from in the beginning, as popular as they are on the ukulele, the key of C and F can be difficult because they start to require you to play chords like an F major chord, right? Which is a bar chord that requires your index finger to hold the first fret. The key of F has, of course, the F chord as well as the B flat. And those chords, until you build up that strength in your left hand, can be difficult, to execute. So start by playing songs in the key of G. One song that you could do is Love Me Do by the Beatles, and that's just G and C, right? It goes, love me do, you know I love you, right? And get familiar with that, moving from G to C. All right, so those are my 5 tips. I hope you guys found that useful. Please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.